is Women for Gun Rights with your host, Amanda Suffecool, part of the DCProject.
Hey, folks. Welcome to Women for Gun Rights. And I'm so excited to be sharing with you our guest for today. And every Friday we have someone who is amazing, who is doing things for gun rights and is so very, very active. And today we have Gabby Franco. So I'm just going to cut right to it because, man, she is so amazing. So Gabby is so many things, absolutely so many things. And we'll start with wife, mother, former Olympian. She's part of the DCProject. She's a professional shooter. She's a firearms trainer. She's an educator when it comes to the Second Amendment. And she does so much speaking that talks about why the Second Amendment is critical to the United States and to Americans. So, hey, Gabby, thanks so much for joining me on Women for Gun Rights.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to be here and talking to you and always seeing you. We always have so much fun.
So I'm telling you, it is always so good. I mean, we ran into each other in Pennsylvania about a month ago, but it's been a long time in between times before that. But it's been good. It's been good. So let's start with, why don't you tell folks a little bit about, well, let's start with Venezuela, the Olympics. How did you get in the shooting sport for Venezuela in the Olympics? So let's start there.
So, back then in Venezuela, which is different, it was so different than what most people think about. I mention and I say, oh, I'm from Venezuela, and people are like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry what happened to your country. And it's sad because the Venezuela before all this socialism utopia was not perfect, but was 100 times better than what it is now. So back then, gun ownership was available. It was not a right per se; it was more like a privilege. But people were allowed to, go through a process and have their concealed carry license and all that stuff. So that's what my dad did. And in the gun range, he learned that they had a junior shooting team, an Olympic shooting team. So he was like, I have actually 3 girls at home. So he put the 3 of us in, he introduced us to the sport. And that's how I started it. Funny story is that my older sister, she started it before. But then my dad kept my younger sister and I kind of doing draft firing and minimum training. He thought that we were too young. I was 11.
Okay.
And mind that back over there, we didn't have necessarily a lot of education when it comes to safety and all that stuff. So I kind of understand his concerns, right? And from there, I just fell in love with the discipline, the sport itself.
Okay.
The firearms were just the tool I used, but the mental preparation, self-control, that trying every single time, trying to make that perfect shot, which was very difficult to make, and demanded like constant training. And to me, the Olympic Games were like a surreal thing. I always thought that Olympians were superhumans. Like, who goes to the Olympic Games, right? And it happens that I went to the Pan American Games in 1999. And that was not my first international competition at all. But I was there. I went to the competition and I got second place at the match. And then I had to go to the finals. And then I went to the finals. And then I won. At the finals, I kept my second place. And the story goes that before that Pan American Games, I had won silver medals in all of my international competitions. So this silver medal, well, was a good thing. I mean, it was the second best shooter in the whole continent. I was like, damn, like silver again?
Again, right?
Right? And the little what I didn't know, uh, that gold and silver medal were plus to go to the Olympic Games in Sydney 2000. So to me, I was like, yeah, I love the medal now.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So you were thinking that only the gold went, and then you found the gold and
I
silver?
I actually didn't even know, to tell the truth.
Oh,
Maybe that was a strategy from my coach and
okay.
the team, that they were just, okay, Gabby, this is a competition, and I'm going to the competition to represent my country, to represent myself, my family, and do my best,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You win a medal, that's awesome, and carry on to the next international match. And I had no idea
Okay.
that this match was exactly an Olympic plaza, or at least I didn't know that silver medal was also an Olympic plaza.
Oh, that's pretty neat. So you went to Sydney in 2000 and
Yes.
participated, and so what was the specific name of the Olympic sport that you participated in?
So I participated in air pistol
Okay.
and sport pistol. So air pistol, we shoot pellets, 10 meters. The target doesn't move. We don't move. And I say so because there were other old disciplines where the target moved.
Mm-hmm.
Our target was a static silhouette. And 22 sport pistol was a 22 caliber pistol.
There we go. Live TV.
Right. So my husband is like, he's like this. So yes, live TV.
Well, didn't we start off by saying you're a mother and a wife, and then the rest
Yes.
of this happens? It just does.
It's funny. I told you, Amanda, you never know with these little kids what they can do. So I was just prepared for it. so, so anyway, the sport pistol, it's two part, like a two portion or two competitions in one per
Okay.
se. So we shoot precision shooting, 20, and it's at 25 meters, and then we shoot rapid fire, which is the target stay remains closed for 7 seconds, and closed for 7 seconds, then opens for 3 seconds. So you have 3 seconds to react, lift your gun, prep, and make a perfect shot.
3 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, less. Actually,
Yeah,
less technically.
because you've got all the in and then all that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So how did you do?
Well, I didn't do as well as I wish I would have.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that, being there in the arena with the best of the best was a great honor. I was nervous. In front of me was one of my shooting heroes, a female shooter. Her name, I still remember her, is Tao Luna. She was a great, great shooter from China,
Mm-hmm.
and she actually won the Olympic medal,
Okay.
and she was Olympic record at the Sydney Olympics. So it was like a nerve-wracking, but an amazing experience.
I mean, it's like, oh, I didn't do as well as I wanted. It was the Olympics, right? I mean, the fact that you were there is so amazing, and then the rest of it goes with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. There's so much to it.
Uh huh.
Part of it is a preparation. We struggle in so many different ways in Venezuela in so many different aspects, but I was sincerely so stoked to be there. There were a lot of emotions that I had. You never know. You can always say, "Oh, I knew if I would have shot a second Olympics, it would have been better." I don't know. Who knows? But it was definitely a dream come true for me,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, because I earned that spot.
Yeah.
I really trained so hard to be there. So yeah.
That is great. So then how did you end up going from living in Venezuela, representing them in the Olympics, to living in the United States and becoming a United States citizen?
Yes. So, um, back into after the 2000 Olympics, I was actually doing great in shooting. After that, remember silver medal, uh, uh, how would say season, I
Mm-hmm.
was just winning gold medals. And in fact, I was Olympic hope for Athens 2004. However, in 1998, after Hugo Chavez took power, right after that, maybe about the Olympics or so, there were restrictions to gun shops, so and restriction to ammunition, restriction to the sale of firearms, and obviously that affected us as in
Mm-hmm.
sport.
Mm-hmm.
Now we couldn't find the pellets that we wanted it. We had a very limited amount of pellets. We couldn't get 22 caliber ammunition. It was very, very difficult to find it. So that really diminished the training, diminished everything that we did, and also the morale. As
Mm-hmm.
an athlete, because you try, you train, you do your best, but if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
the tools, the necessary tools, that affects you. And so back then, I have who was my ex-husband. He kept bugging me to go to the United States, but I always thought, you know, okay, I go there to do what? You know what I mean? I was not too familiar with the immigration laws or anything like that. I lived in
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela and that's it. But I did have some sense of that, yeah, you do have to have some sort of visa or legal status to stay there. So, in one visit when I came to Miami, we went to a book fair, and that was in 2002. And I met in this book fair, which there are thousands, if not millions, of people who go to this book fair in Miami, uh, a girl who went with me to the Olympic Games. She was like literally next to me as we were watching a show. It was I was like you, and she was like you, and she was a tennis player. I don't know if she does it right now, but we ended up talking, and she gave me her lawyer information and how she ended up staying in the United States. Um, and I went through the process. I talked to this lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, there are not guarantees, but you have a strong case. So I applied what it is an O visa, or what is also called the extraordinary ability visa. And after I submitted my oh well, before that, I left everything behind. Like everybody was against it. My parents, my family, and the shooting federation, they were going like nuts. The Venezuelan Shooting Federation were going nuts because I left. I just put my clothes. I brought my last two gold medals from Brazil, my South American medals, some pictures, family pictures, some album from the Olympic Games, and that's it. And I moved, and I didn't look back. And back in my heart, I knew that even though I was Olympic hope for Athens 2004, and even you could say it was going to be my second Olympics, I was going to be more confident, which I was. I was already winning gold medals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would I do with the medals
Yeah.
if you don't have, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What would you do
Yeah,
with the
what does
medals?
it doesn't it's great, but it doesn't keep you living indoors or all of that, Yes. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So I moved here and applied for, this visa.
Mm-hmm.
And in a year, I became a permanent resident, which is rare. But my
Mm-hmm.
case was not only strong, it was true, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never looked back. And I'm glad I didn't. It was a very, very rough, bold, whatever adjective you want to find, decision. But it was definitely the right one, and not an easy one for sure.
That is amazing. So, did the United States at that point see what was going on with Hugo Chavez? Did they, or did they give you? Was that part of the reason why they allowed you to have permanent residency because what was happening in Venezuela, or it really hadn't yet deteriorated? You saw that it was happening because you were looking at this at what is our Second Amendment. You were looking at the gun rights and the restrictions that were happening there.
Well, I have to say that a big influence I had friends, Cuban friends, who talked a lot about what Hugo Chavez talked, what his plans, what he was going to do, what he said he was going to do, and what he was already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and their thought was like, you guys are going to end up in socialism. And I remember people at the gun range, they were saying, here we're the richest country in Latin America. That will
Mm-hmm.
never ever happen here. We have the largest oil reserve in the world, and obviously people disregarded many of my friends, conversations, or because they say, but Venezuela is not an island, Cuba is an island. You see, you couldn't escape, so you were surrounded, you couldn't do much, and so on and so forth. And little behold, here we are. Venezuelans are just in misery. I mean, it's surreal
Mm-hmm.
what Venezuela has turned. And so when I moved here, and they approved my visa. It was nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with the country, with the issue with the country, because Venezuela was still fine. You could
Mm-hmm.
even travel, and you wouldn't see much of a difference. The difference was not very, it was not so external, more than internal. Okay,
Okay.
there were already little things like ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
People, regular people who didn't have firearms or would have never
Yeah.
noticed it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Other things about businesses, controlling the price of things. Some people agree with that because, oh yeah, of course, control what these people can make. The business owners, they wanted to control production. They want to control. So it was, at first, at that time when I came here, it was very internal, the problems, not so much external.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, here in the United States, they approved my visa because of my curriculum as an athlete,
Mm-hmm.
and all my awards and recognition nationally and
Mm-hmm.
internationally.
Okay. That's great though. So, do you have any additional Olympic plans here in the United States?
I actually trained for the 2016 Olympic Games,
Okay.
and I bought everything. Like, I bought my air pistol, I bought a whole equipment to train and all that stuff. And then that's when I realized I had neck issues.
Okay.
And so I decided to scrap that idea because my neck issues were kind of serious. Last year I was like this close. They wanted to put me in surgery, and I said no. And I've been doing everything to avoid that. But so as you can imagine, but I shooting sports. I've been doing it for three, let's say, 3/4 of my life.
I was gonna
Okay.
say you do not look like you are old enough to have participated in the 2020 Olympic or the 2000 Olympics. I mean, there just
Yes.
isn't. It just doesn't have that look. So so you spend time now talking to Americans about Venezuela versus the United States, about the socialism and the things that are being said and done here in the United States, the restrictions that people are trying to do. And how is that received?
I was speaking so much about it, and at first it was not received very well, and I couldn't understand it. I don't know why it didn't click. I was like, but don't you understand what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
I wanted just to get in their heads, and then you know what? I had to step back. And then I was like, wow, it's almost like I'm watching the movie again a second time, but this time it's more like a horror movie,
Mm-hmm.
because back then in Venezuela I didn't know what I was watching. Like typical in the horror movies, that at the beginning everything is pretty and everything's nice, and you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I kind of left halfway the movie, and now I'm living the horror movie because I know what's happening. I know that, it's real. And the people saying, "Oh, this is the United States. This is not going to happen here." I'm like, "Oh God, Lord,
I heard
let
that.
me let me hold myself." Or they say, "Yes, let's go in socialism." The kids, or when they talk about the 1%, oh, the 1% makes too much money. We have to tax them. We have even more. We have to make the workers to have more power over their business. And all I can think is like, only if they knew. I mean, I'm talking to those people who think like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only if they knew that this 1%, these corporations that they want to literally strangle, they can leave, right? And then there's not going to be no more 1%. Then there's going to be the middle class that they're going to tax. You see, because there's so much that you can keep creating this chokehold on people. And those people that you're creating the chokehold that they can leave, they will. And they have
Mm-hmm.
done it. They have done it here in the United States. They have businesses have left. This is not the first
Mm-hmm.
time it had happened.
Right.
So it is. I have a conflicting thoughts too, because in Venezuela, you can justify those beliefs thinking, well, Venezuela, we literally don't have many educated people. We had amazing doctors and medicals, but not everybody had the fortune to be well educated. We had a lot of children who never went to school. So we have that, right? But then you come to the United States, where the vast majority of people are educated. At least they have gone through most of the high school.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to read. They can look online. They can read what really socialism is, how it has not worked in
Right.
other countries,
Mm-hmm.
and you still see that they embrace it. So, I mean, to me, it's almost like unbelievable that this is
Mm-hmm.
even possible, you know? But then it's almost like an introspection into analyzing why this happened. And I believe, and I come out to the conclusion that I believe the message, the product is the same, right? Socialism, communism, whatever, Marxism, however you want
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
put it, it's almost, they all kind of go in the same bucket, because they kind of go in a process, right? And they go into the end product. um but the messaging changes. So one of the things i I think that could be it, is that the American people, which is have a great virtue, which is the American people is very generous.
Mm-hmm.
You see, people love to donate, people love to support organizations, and it's almost like I am part of the solution. I donate, and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
grandiose kind of deal, right? And the message is to the American people is like, let's do socialism because that's how we're going to help the poor. Or that's how we're going to help
Mm-hmm.
these people.
We're gonna give
And
these
it's
guys a hand up, and mm-hmm.
right. So it seems plausible. What was different in Venezuela? In Venezuela was like more. It was the hate was bigger,
Mm-hmm.
but it was very strong hate between classes. Okay, so the hate is also another element that exists. The hate element here in the United States, while there's a little bit of, oh, they have and don't have, it's not compared to Venezuela, because we really had people who had nothing, like the vast majority. Okay, but they have to create hate. So the hate now here is hate between races.
Yeah.
You see, so my point is, what I have found out is that the product is the same, is how they market their product
Mm-hmm.
and how they use these elements in a different ways, but to at the end make the people buy the product,
Right.
which is socialism.
I think that's a great point. I mean, because one of the things that I learned in management school years ago was it was
Hmm.
really easy to manage a team if you had a common enemy. So think about it like sports teams. Even though it's all good natured, Cleveland Browns doesn't like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're this natural enemies, and so you can get people to buy logoed gear and do this and do that, get really involved because that other team is coming to town and we've got to stop them. So having a common enemy makes it so that people are cohesive in whatever. And so I think you're onto something. I think that you're right in the fact that that's an easy way to kind of direct people's efforts in a direction that you want them, or that someone wants them to go.
And I see it because it doesn't make sense. Sometimes I talk to very educated people. You
Mm-hmm.
see, very, very educated people. And it's almost like it seems like bigger for them to say that they are doing something,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's something for a few, which is not even proven that it's going to help them
Right.
continue to success. Because the problem is not like we know it's not about uh, giving a hand that okay, I'm going to help you get out of the hole right now, but how can we continue? How can you make these people to continue that success? Like for example, I don't obviously I don't have to say that an immigrant, but I didn't know English. I was rock bottom before everybody knew me from Top Shot and everything, like
Mm-hmm.
rock bottom, like full of debt, unemployed. My ex-husband had left me back then. I had nothing, like nothing. My family was not even here. I just had a cousin and a few friends. So, I mean, tell me about desperation. Tell me about uh, feeling empty and desperate. But yet, I knew that I was in the United States, and I knew that all I could do it was do my best to get out of the situation, and I did. Not because I'm a special or because like no, I actually worked, and I didn't work in when after that I found a part-time job. It had nothing to do with firearms,
Mm-hmm.
and it was nothing to do with stuff that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, hey, this is what it is. This is what I have to do. Well, I'll do it because I can do whatever it takes for me to get out of this situation. So, the problem is that here people are, or some politicians, keep ingraining people like, no, it's so bad. It's so terrible. It's psychological
Mm-hmm.
keeping people down so much that they don't see the opportunities out there.
Right.
So they see is the moment. It's just like how I get out of my situation right now, but you don't see how that's going to help you out right now. It's going to be detrimental to you
For the
in
long term.
3-5 years, and it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be detrimental to you. Okay,
Right.
so it's like human behavior, human thought process is fascinating because of that. Even the most brilliant people can fall into that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow.
It is. It's really, really interesting. So let's talk about how you think that the United States government, by restricting our guns, is kind of sending us down the path of Venezuela. That we how do you draw those corollaries? Because I think that they have to disarm us to be able to continue the path that they're trying, that they seem to be on, that no one quite understands why, but they seem to be on.
I think, if we talk sincerely, like very sincerely with everything that has going on, it's very unfortunate to say that probably the government has realized that, they need to do that, but that is not necessarily the the ultimate thing. Okay, why? For two things. One, the Second Amendment is part of the Constitution, so they cannot get rid of it just like that. Okay, they cannot just say, okay, I'm just gonna scrap it. I'm the president. I'm gonna just make a executive, you know,
Mm-hmm.
action and get rid of the Second Amendment, right? They can do create chokeholds in gun shops.
Mm-hmm.
They do. They can create taxes. They can create a 300. percent taxes on ammunition or X amount of taxes on guns. So they are not necessarily going to take away your guns. They're going to create such a chokehold that there's a point where the gun owners are going to say, "Whoa, I cannot afford this. I cannot do this anymore." Okay,
Well,
so that's the first thing.
I think you're right, and I think there's a couple other things that are going along with it. They can use the government power to the
Mm-hmm.
ATF to make it miserable for someone who
Oh
owns a
yeah.
gun shop to be able to make guns available. So they can convince the population that guns are sold on the internet, and so they just try to keep saying that. They keep saying guns show loopholes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they send the ATF to weaponize the ATF and that government entity to restrict that, because what'll then happen is if they can close a portion of the gun shops, you can't get a gun because you can't get it any other way unless you go to a gun shop, and so they'll make it harder and harder to be able to get to one. Chicago is a
So
perfect example.
right, and you touched something which I was going to be the follow up of
Okay.
my answer is that uh, typical is they are conditioning people. Okay, that's why I mentioned what everything that's going on. Right,
Mm-hmm.
who would have thought that the American people would accept it to be held in their homes, right? That they were going to be forced to do certain things that literally they're affecting your First Amendment. You can even ask questions. You can even, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
in so many different aspects. So what they're doing is creating this communication, this marketing efforts that is going to be the American people at the end who would say, "Oh yeah, I think that makes sense." For instance, in Venezuela, what was the big deal about banning firearms? Okay, they had uh, they literally want to disarm the population. They refer to the criminals, okay, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously they couldn't. They, even today,
Right.
the government has ties with the criminals because they cannot control them,
Mm-hmm.
plain simple like that.
Right.
But for the general people, they don't think like that. People are like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think you're right. We need to disarm the criminals. So
Mm-hmm.
if I need to disarm the criminals, so yeah, you have to start with me, sure. Because it
Right.
seems like the messaging seems like plausible, seems like it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And I have to say something for those of you who are watching now and they hear all these celebrities siding with, yes, we need to have more control laws and all that stuff. Guess what? Who were the first ones who created campaigns for the government disarmament? Actors and high profile individuals who
Mm-hmm.
many of them ended up being very tight today, very tight with the government, with the regime,
Mm-hmm.
and they have bodyguards. They have the money to pay for all these people, and the population, you know, nothing. So that's what I'm saying. That
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, and that's why it's so important. People wake up, and more than wake up, I think they have to read more.
Mm-hmm.
Because we always say, wake up, wake up. No, read more. Read about history. Read about what's going on around the world. Read about the how gun laws have not worked in so many different states. Read about the real news that says like, hey, the governments have the police tied. They cannot
Mm-hmm.
protect you. What are you gonna do? So read more.
I agree with that. Read more and get your news from international sources also,
Yeah.
not just the standard mainstream media, because it is tailored to a message that you and I may not agree with. And so
Right.
sometimes you're watching the news and you're not getting the news. You're getting it starts with, have you seen where the news is will actually announce people's Twitter there's Twitter posts, and and if somebody, so it's like the news has turned into opinion-based stuff that people think they're getting the news, and they're really
Yeah.
not. And they're not looking at history, they're not looking at other countries, they're not. And so I want to go back to something that you said, where you had said
Yeah.
that that we were conditioning people to think that the United States was so horrible. And
Yeah.
you know, someone said one time, and it resonated with me, is that if the United States was so horrible, why are people trying to break into it, not break out of it?
Right.
And
Right.
so, and I think that that's a big telling tale to the whole thing. So let's move on, though, because I think that's those are very poignant points. And but we want a little bit more on the happy side. So you were participating in
Yeah.
Top Shot. So what's the
Yes.
story? How did you get on Top Shot?
So, it's funny story because I was a viewer, a fan, like many of you were watching,
Hmm.
and I've never in a million years thought about being on Top Shot. And my brother kept saying, "You should apply for Top Shot." I'm like, "What? No, you're crazy. I'm not a TV person at all." And long story short, I was, on social media, and I saw an announcement, like an advertisement. This
Hmm.
is the last week to apply for Top Shot. And I was like, and I click on it, and sure enough, there was like a last week, and had the what we needed to apply and all that stuff. So I sent the pictures and an email, and I sent it all. Well, or thought, oh, so I thought. And after I sent the email, I went back to the link to see what else, the link said. And then it said, along with your email and your pictures, send a video. And I was like, I didn't send the video. So I thought they were not going to call me.
Hmm.
And they actually called me, and I was like, oh my God, I was freaking out. So it was a very fun experience. I
Hmm.
got to go to LA to do the selection portion of the competition.
Hmm.
So it was very fun.
That's neat. So were you on once or twice?
I went twice. So on
Twice.
season 4, that was the first one,
Okay.
and I got to get the green shirts, which is the last part of last portion of the competition.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I got eliminated with that 1,500-yard shot. Right, so it was crazy because on our practice, during the practice, they made us shoot at 750 yards. And mind it, at that point, the farthest. And I did it for maybe 10 shots. That shot
Hmm.
was 500 yards. So 750 was a big stretch for me.
Hmm.
And when we got to the actual challenge, I look at the guys and say, "Hey guys, where is the target?" And they were like, "You see that little dot over there?" I was like, "No way!" So yes, and that was definitely a learning experience.
That's amazing. And then you were on the second time, because I know that at one point I interviewed Brian Gunny Zins, and
Yes,
he was on one of the shows with you. Um,
yes, season
it,
5.
okay, yeah, because he was saying, and I don't remember exactly, but it was something about the fact that you were shooting a gun that weighed as much as you did. And so that was his comment, was that, man, they did not cut her any slack at all.
Yeah, it was a very, I was the only woman there, but I was just like, okay, bring it on.
Hmm.
And yes, we were shooting this big, huge revolver. And it's funny that you mentioned him because we were during the practice, we were shooting in pairs. So he was on a table, and I was not exactly next to him, but sort of next to him
Hmm.
in another table. And at the end of our practice, he said, "Gabby, where do you go every time you shot?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because his impersonation was so funny because he said, "Every time I shot, I did like 3 steps back. And then had to come back to my table, shoot again, and then come back at it." I was like, "Oh, Brian." But he was probably right. I
Yeah.
can't even argue that.
So he because at one point he was in Ohio, and he's since moved and was participating at Camp Perry. And so
Yes.
he brought his national match pistol and to the radio studio where we interviewed him, and he brought a turkey sandwich. And so he says that he attributed a lot of his success to the turkey sandwich, and I just thought that was
That's
hysterical.
funny.
So, so
He's such a great guy.
he really is. I mean, the shooting sports is so full of good people who are so active and so willing to help you in whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yes.
And that's part of what I absolutely love about it. And that brings us to the DC project. So how did you get the invitation to participate in the DC project?
Well, Dee Mueller, she contacted me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was 7 months pregnant when she said, "Okay, guys, we're supposed to be here this day." I'm like, "Dee, I'm gonna be 7 months pregnant, but I'll be there." And it was, she said we're gonna go and and talk to different legislators and all
Mm-hmm.
that. And I was just this huge belly walking everywhere, but it was phenomenal experience. So much so that I was like, okay, I'll do this as many times as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I was gonna have a newborn and a kid, but as often as I can, and whatever you guys need me for, I'm here. I think one
Mm-hmm.
of the best thing I really enjoy about the DC project is that besides that we're women and all that stuff, we understand both sides of the aisle. We just know we're not just women who just shoot and that's all we do. We
Mm-hmm.
have women who are Democrats. We have women who have been on the other side, didn't have anything to do with firearms, and then
Mm-hmm.
they learned about firearms, about self-defense. And so it is to me, it's a blessing that I can talk to all these women, because my experience, and people talk to me and ask about my experience and everything, but I'm more eager to listen to others, and tell them, you know what, your experience is very important too. It's valuable, but more than that you can talk to people that matter, in this case legislators, who we need them to keep fighting for the Second Amendment, obviously, keep protecting the Second Amendment. And those who may not change their mind because they really hate firearms, or for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, but at least we can bring them real stories. We can bring them, this is not hypotheticals.
Mm-hmm.
This lady was able to protect herself and against rape, or she was raped because she couldn't have anything, or her husband was killed, or they are real
Right.
stories.
They're
And
and they're heartbreaking stories as you listen
uh
to them, and then you see how they've persevered and what they've done, and the fact that why they are fighting so hard because they
and
they
and, and
believe it so hard.
right, and while there are difficult stories, at the end of the day, they end up being happy, because there's no more power than you having that independence, and saying, I can, because I'm the only one more interested in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's more interested than me
Right.
to maintain myself alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have that power that you can say, I can protect myself, I can defend myself, I can defend my child. And again, these are no hypothetical events or stories. And
Mm-hmm.
so being part of this project is that it's not only what we do, but who we do it with, who we surround each other with,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that the mission is a mission that is not about, oh, because of the farms industry. No, this helps even the person who doesn't want to have anything to do with guns, but today, because of riots and everything, they feel the need to go and get a gun to protect themselves.
Man, you're hearing a
Hey,
lot more of
you
that.
know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So this is
Mm-hmm.
not something that we do it for us. This is something that we do for everybody, regardless of race, gender, uh, economical status for future generations, and we do it not, and that's the thing, those who are anti-gun, they do it, in my eyes, on the base of hate and fear. In my case, I actually do it in the face of opportunity, of future, of life. So it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like a different approach.
Right. I mean, and they talk about this. This is the part that I think is really is really where we can come together, and that is that everybody wants to reduce crime. We just
Oh yeah,
believe that there's different ways to go about that, and so
right.
by disarming me doesn't make you any safer.
Oh
Because the
no.
criminal is still going to do whatever the criminal is going to do, because that would be why they're labeled as a criminal. They don't follow the laws. So new laws, new restrictions don't really help in any kind of a manner that way.
And the latest event, I think, is proof of that. We had a man who was law career criminal, and who killed several people, and dozens hurt, and who knows how badly hurt many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just terrible when you hear politicians who say, "Oh no, once we take guns away, the problem is going to be solved," or
So
"Yeah, you
you're
didn't."
talking about Waukesha in the car, where he used
Yeah,
his
yeah.
car as the weapon.
Hmm.
So
Right.
yeah, evil doesn't necessarily have to have this specific weapon. They can weaponize pretty much anything that they have handy to
Yeah.
be able to cause harm and mayhem and strife. Yeah, I
Right.
agree.
Definitely.
I absolutely agree with that. So, trying to go tick down through. Oh, I know. The last in 2019, 2020, I can't remember which year now, you had gone and testified. It wasn't really testified, but you had spoken to the staffers for one of the Senate judiciary groups in
Right.
talking about Venezuela. Did they? How was that received? And what was your thoughts? So I'm going full circle. I mean, because
Yeah.
you had gone with the DC Project to tell your story to people that were wondering what an immigrant from Venezuela had to say about the Second Amendment, right?
Right.
So how was it
So,
received? What did they say, or what did you get back out of that?
well, it's very hard to tell the
Mm-hmm.
truth. To me, this is almost like a new arena for me. And generally they get like surprised, because most likely they never heard that part of the story. They only
Mm-hmm.
heard whatever the news threw at them. And so often they get like, "Oh wow, like that really happened." And I have talked to some who are, the staffers of people who are, like anti-gun legislators or congressmen or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't care. You know what I mean? It's almost like they brush it off and they don't want to hear it. They
Mm-hmm.
almost like, if I don't hear it, I don't have to feel it. You
Okay.
see,
Yeah.
if I don't hear it, I don't have to even think about it. So it's not true, or just brush it off in my head. On the other hand, especially when we talked this year with this many of the staffers, I saw in their eyes that they could relate to it. They could
Mm-hmm.
relate to what I was saying, especially because I tied it up to what's happening right now. You
Mm-hmm.
know, stuff that you would never imagine that would have happened in America,
Right.
and it's happening now, and it's not a secret. And I heard even in people telling me all the time that, if this whatever happened, a civil war is going to happen. I'm like, no, it's not. And that's a part of the people who are very passionate to understand. because we have families. You have a car, a house to pay. You still need your job. It's so much you can stay aside and do, stay on the street or whatever. Except if you are paid by the government and blah 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 blah
Right.
and to
Mm-hmm.
riot, right? But my point is that, doing what we're doing, that, or if you cannot do what we do, like which is talking to legislators, you should always call the legislators or support organization like ours that we're doing. I mean, I think we're doing an amazing job on doing that. So, it's a mixed feelings when you talk to these people, because unfortunately, you know most people are set on what they believe, and it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
crack that egg and say, hey, just truly listen to me. I'm not saying change your mind right now, but just truly listen to me, internalize what I'm saying, and find the truth what I'm saying with the facts,
Mm-hmm.
you see. So it is tricky. People think that talking to legislators and their staffers is an easy thing to do. To me, it's not necessarily easy, because you can see
Mm-hmm.
it both ways. And sometimes it's you leave with that, yes, we did, and sometimes you are like, oh my God. These people are like so rock solid what they want,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard.
It is. And the the thing about people fighting back is that if they did some kind of a huge swing where people are like black and white, or yes and no, whatever that is, and I don't mean race black and white, I mean when the switch is flipped kind of thing, but instead it's
Mhm.
just a little bit of change and then a little bit of change, and
Right.
it's all the shades of gray. So is this gray too gray? Are you gonna accept this? Or are you not? Are you going to, it's just a little change. It's just a little restriction. It's just a little, and it's erosion over time, and
It
it
is.
just keeps wearing away, to where one day we look up and find out that there's so much stuff that we no longer have, and
Right.
we don't really notice or know when was the day that it changed.
Right.
So, so I think
It
that's
is.
that's one of the beauties of what the DC project is doing, is that we're showing people that it's the face of the Second Amendment that isn't what they've expected. It isn't a
Mhm.
bearded hunting guy who wears a plaid shirt that says, "You're not taking my gun." It's a mom saying, "I want to use it to defend my child." It's a rape victim who says, "I'm never going to be raped again, and I've gotten the tools to be able to protect myself." It's
Right.
it's those kinds of people that speak to them, and so it may resonate in a completely different manner, and so I think that's the beauty of the DC project.
Right. Right. It is. It is. I think it's fascinating in so many ways that, like you're saying, that they don't expect all these women to come into their offices and
Mm-hmm.
talk about, we want firearms to protect ourselves, or
Mm-hmm.
we do believe in the Second Amendment. But, I think also we need to, and I think we do it. I think we do it in so many different ways, because we tell them it's also my husband, who may be this white bearded man. You know what I mean? Or it could be a
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic, or it could be a black man, or who cares? It's
Mm-hmm.
just we are all Americans. And that's also that we, push out that we have a lot of variety of people in our organization. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's very sad that we get to this point that even politicians had to say, oh, if that person talking about the Second Amendment looks like this or looks like that, then I'm not going to listen. You know what I mean? And that's the part that we as women, which we didn't have in Venezuela, I have to say, because women for the most part were very against, the vast majority were very against gun, because of this social idea of what
Mm-hmm.
guns meant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very blessed that, and I think as women, as we bring more women and educate them
Mm-hmm.
about safety, firearm safety, and everything, we will be able to protect even more the Second Amendment. And legislator will realize that, well, you know what? What these ladies have been coming for the past few years telling me A, B, or C, now it's not about what they're telling me, but it's what I see.
Hmm.
And I think that the work it's constant. We just constantly work on it, and it's gonna pay off for sure.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think that once they hear it, even if they don't want to hear it, later when they hear
Hmm.
something that corresponds to that, they'll be like, I've heard that. I've heard that.
Yes,
Right. So,
exactly.
well, Gabby, I want to thank you very much for joining me on Women for Gun Rights. This has been an exciting and interesting conversation, because I think it went full circle as to that you fight and why you fight, and and the background to it. And so I really, really appreciate it. So, folks, we're going to sign off. Next week, we will have another show. There are amazing women all over the United States that are doing things with the Second Amendment, that are doing things with guns and firearms and education. And you're going to have an opportunity to meet them each and every Friday evening at 7 o'clock on this station. So thanks a lot. Gabby, we will
Thank you.
see you again.
Yes, thank you so much.
This is Women for Gun Rights with your host, Amanda Suffecool, part of the DC Project.